In the grim darkness of the far future, where the Imperium of man stretches across countless worlds, the Emperor of mankind stands as the pinnacle of authority and divine reverence. His name inspires both fear and devotion, and his will shapes the very fabric of the galaxy. To many, he is the savior of humanity, the eternal guardian who sacrificed himself to protect mankind from the horrors of the warp and the unending tide of Xenos threats. But for all his grandeur, the Emperor's rule has never been one of mercy or leniency. The Imperium is a realm built on blood, fire, and unrelenting discipline. At its heart lies the unshakable belief that the Emperor's vision is absolute, and those who deviate from it are threats to the survival of humanity itself. Within this vast and dystopian empire, loyalty is demanded without question, and obedience is not just expected, it is enforced with ruthless efficiency. For the Emperor, the ends justify the means, and no cost is too great to ensure the survival of his grand design. Yet even amidst the towering cathedrals and endless regiments of the Imperium's military might, there is an unspoken truth. To betray the Emperor is to invite unimaginable wrath. The punishments meted out to those who defy his will or challenge his authority are not simply acts of retribution. They are statements, reminders to all that the Emperor's justice is as unyielding as it is devastating. These punishments, cruel and horrifying, serve as both a deterrent and a warning, reinforcing the idea that no one, not even the greatest heroes of humanity, are exempt from the consequences of disobedience. As we delve into the depths of the Emperor's most infamous punishments, we will uncover stories that have become cautionary tales across the stars. Some are whispered in the shadows of hive cities, while others are etched into the annals of imperial history as grim reminders of the cost of betrayal. But to understand these acts of vengeance, one must first grasp the foundation upon which they are built. A galaxy in turmoil, a vision for unity, and a ruler whose capacity for cruelty is matched only by his unwavering resolve. This is not a story of mercy. It is a story of iron will, of power wielded without hesitation, and of lessons taught through pain and fear. The Emperor's punishments are not just acts of retribution. They are symbols of his authority, reflections of his belief that the survival of humanity justifies any means. In a galaxy where the light of hope flickers precariously, his justice is often the only constant, a reminder that even gods demand sacrifices. And so, we begin our exploration of the Emperor's most infamous and cruel punishments. Punishments that have shaped not only the lives of those they were inflicted upon, but also the very destiny of the Imperium itself. Through these tales, we will witness the lengths to which the Emperor will go to maintain control and the chilling reality of what it means to defy the master of mankind. Standing at the heart of the events surrounding the Emperor's most cruel punishments are the key figures and entities that embody the complexity and ruthlessness of the Imperium. These actors, bound by duty, conviction, or circumstance, play a vital role in enforcing or enduring the decisions that have marked humanity's history with fear and awe. Their involvement is as diverse as their origins, yet each serves as a testament to the sheer scale of the Emperor's reach and the unrelenting nature of his rule. First and foremost, there are the enforcers of the Emperor's will, those tasked with carrying out his edicts and ensuring that no defiance goes unanswered. The Adeptus Arbites, the galaxy-spanning organization responsible for maintaining imperial law, are at the forefront of this effort. Clad in armor and wielding the authority of the Emperor, they act as the iron fist of justice, executing punishments with cold precision. Their presence is a constant reminder that no individual, regardless of status, is beyond the reach of the law. Beyond the Arbites, the ecclesiarchy wields its influence over the spiritual domain of humanity. This organization is charged not only with spreading the imperial creed, but also with identifying and rooting out heresy. Their role in the Emperor's punishments is both direct and indirect, as they inspire and mobilize the faithful to act as extensions of the Emperor's judgment. Through sermons, inquisitions, and acts of public penance, the ecclesiarchy ensures that fear of punishment is deeply ingrained in the hearts of the Imperium's citizens. Another critical group is the Inquisition, an organization whose very name strikes terror into the souls of men. Comprised of individuals who operate outside the conventional structures of power, the Inquisition serves as the Emperor's ultimate tool for rooting out threats to humanity. Their methods are secretive, their actions decisive, and their punishments often extreme. The Inquisition is divided into various ordos, each focusing on a specific area of threat, and their agents wield unmatched authority, answering only to the Emperor himself. Also integral to the narrative are the vast military forces of the Imperium. The Astra Militarum, known as the Hammer of the Emperor, plays a significant role in enforcing the will of the Imperium. These forces are often called upon to enact large-scale punishments, whether through the annihilation of rebellious worlds or the suppression of uprisings. Their sheer numbers and unwavering loyalty make them a formidable instrument of imperial discipline. The Imperial Navy, too, is a key participant. With fleets that span the galaxy, they are often the first responders to insurrections or heretical movements. Their ability to execute orbital bombardments, blockade rebellious systems, and transport the Emperor's forces ensures that no corner of the galaxy is beyond their reach. The power they wield is immense, and their involvement in enacting punishment is as critical as it is devastating. Among those who are subjected to the Emperor's most severe judgments are the rebellious planetary governors and noble houses. These individuals, tasked with maintaining order on their respective worlds, are held to the highest standards of loyalty. Failure, betrayal, or disobedience often results in swift and brutal punishment, with their actions serving as cautionary tales to others in positions of power. The Mechanicum of Mars also plays an essential role, though their focus lies in the technological and logistical aspects of the Emperor's vision. While they are not typically involved in the physical execution of punishments, their expertise in crafting the tools of retribution is unmatched. The weapons, machines, and constructs they provide are often used to enforce the Emperor's will, and their contributions to these events cannot be overlooked. Finally, there are the countless billions of ordinary citizens who live and die under the Emperor's rule. These individuals often bear witness to the consequences of defiance, their lives shaped by the fear and reverence that the Emperor's punishments inspire. Though they are rarely direct participants, their role as the audience to these events is vital in maintaining the culture of obedience that permeates the Imperium. Together, these groups and individuals form the intricate web of actors involved in the Emperor's most severe judgments. Each plays a unique role in shaping the outcome of these events, whether as enforcers of his will, victims of his wrath, or witnesses to the power he wields. Their actions and experiences provide the foundation upon which the legacy of the Emperor's punishments is built, highlighting the vast and unyielding nature of his dominion. The roots of the Emperor's most brutal punishments can be traced to the unforgiving realities of the galaxy in the 40k era. The Imperium of man was not forged through idealism or diplomacy, but through unrelenting warfare and the need to control a fractured and chaotic humanity. Long before the Imperium reached its current form, the galaxy was a patchwork of warring factions, scattered colonies, and isolated civilizations, each pulling humanity further from unity. The Emperor's vision demanded cohesion at any cost, and the tools of coercion, fear, and overwhelming punishment became necessary instruments in this monumental effort. The Age of Strife was a period that left humanity divided and vulnerable. Rampant warp storms isolated worlds for millennia, cutting off trade, communication, and cultural exchange. As a result, countless human populations diverged, developing their own laws, customs, and beliefs. Many abandoned faith in a unified future, instead turning to Xenos alliances, forbidden technologies, or outright heretical ideologies. The Emperor's unyielding ambition to reunite humanity under his banner meant that these divergent paths would be met with harsh retribution, as any deviation from his vision was viewed as a direct threat to mankind's survival. The galaxy's fragmentation also bred rebellion and resistance. Some resisted imperial rule out of fear of losing their autonomy, while others outright rejected the Emperor's ideals, seeing them as tyrannical. This defiance could not be allowed to stand. To ensure loyalty and deter further insubordination, examples had to be made. Those who dared to rise against the Emperor's will would not only face defeat, but annihilation so absolute that their memory served as a cautionary tale for others who might consider rebellion. Additionally, the rise of heresy and corruption created a fertile ground for punitive measures. In a galaxy where the Imperium's influence seeped into every corner, even whispers of warp-tainted corruption posed a catastrophic threat to human survival. The Emperor's punishments became a vital mechanism for rooting out heretical beliefs and purging those who had been seduced by dark forces. The need to contain the spread of such influences often led to preemptive strikes, cleansing entire worlds to prevent contamination from spreading further. The Mechanicum's technological ambitions added another layer of tension. While they were critical allies in the Emperor's efforts, their pursuit of knowledge and power occasionally clashed with his strict edicts. Unregulated experimentation and breaches of the Emperor's decrees led to conflicts that necessitated swift and severe responses. The enforcement of his technological mandates became a cornerstone of maintaining the delicate balance between progress and control. Another critical factor was the Emperor's reliance on fear as a unifying force. While he is often depicted as a figure of enlightenment, his methods frequently relied on instilling terror to ensure compliance. The Imperium's scale meant that localized punishments, no matter how severe, were insufficient. Messages had to resonate across star systems, which is why acts of punishment were designed to be not only devastating, but also highly visible. These acts became symbolic displays, ensuring that even the most distant colonies understood the consequences of disobedience. Lastly, the internal pressures of the Imperium itself created a demand for ruthless discipline. As the Emperor's domain expanded, the logistical challenges of governing billions of worlds became immense. Corruption, inefficiency, and discontent were inevitable. Local governors, military commanders, and bureaucrats occasionally exploited their positions or acted against imperial law. The Emperor's punishments were necessary to instill fear in the ranks of his own administration, reinforcing that no one was above his authority. The culmination of these factors, fragmentation, rebellion, heresy, technological tension, and internal corruption, created an environment where extreme measures were deemed essential. The galaxy's unrelenting chaos, combined with the Emperor's vision for absolute unity, demanded a system of enforcement that left no room for mercy. This context set the stage for some of the most infamous punishments in Imperial history, where the cost of defiance was paid in blood and suffering, and where the lessons learned came at the greatest imaginable cost. The events that marked the Emperor's most cruel punishments unfolded across various stages, each defined by escalation and an unyielding commitment to maintaining order. These acts, though diverse in their execution, shared a common purpose: to serve as definitive responses to disobedience, treachery, or defiance. The progression of these events revealed not only the scale of the Emperor's authority, but also the lengths to which the Imperium would go to enforce its will. The first stage often began with the identification of a transgression. This could range from rebellion and heresy to acts of negligence or corruption among the Imperium's leadership. Early warnings might be issued through messengers or envoys, with the offending parties given an opportunity to atone or comply. These initial warnings were often symbolic in nature, carrying veiled threats and reminders of the consequences of continued disobedience. In some cases, the mere presence of the Emperor's emissaries or banners was enough to quell dissent, as the fear of reprisal loomed large over the guilty. When warnings went unheeded, the next stage typically involved the deployment of investigators or agents of enforcement. These individuals or groups were tasked with gathering evidence of wrongdoing and preparing the groundwork for more severe actions. The Inquisition, for instance, frequently conducted covert operations to root out heretical behavior or subversion. Their findings determined the scale and nature of the response. In many cases, the presence of investigators heightened tensions, creating a climate of paranoia as individuals sought to distance themselves from suspicion or potential guilt. Once culpability was confirmed, punitive action was initiated. This stage often began with localized measures aimed at neutralizing immediate threats. Loyalist forces, whether they were the Adeptus Arbites, Astra Militarum, or specialized strike teams, were dispatched to suppress insurrections, apprehend traitorous leaders, or dismantle rebellious organizations. These actions were swift and precise, designed to eliminate resistance and restore control in a single, decisive strike. Often, this stage served as a prelude to the far more devastating acts of retribution that would follow. If the initial suppression proved insufficient or the transgression was deemed severe enough to warrant an example, the scale of the response escalated dramatically. Entire planetary systems could be subjected to brutal campaigns of retribution, with mass executions, forced labor, or orbital bombardments employed to drive the message home. These actions were not only meant to punish the guilty, but also to send a clear signal to other systems. Defiance would not be tolerated. During these campaigns, the Imperium often mobilized vast resources, demonstrating the full weight of its military and administrative machinery. In cases of extreme defiance, the Imperium resorted to its most severe punishment, exterminatus. This grim tactic involved the complete destruction of a planet's biosphere, erasing all life in a single apocalyptic act. Such measures were reserved for situations where a world was deemed irredeemable, whether due to widespread heresy, corruption, or other forms of contamination. The exterminatus served not only as punishment, but also as a means of ensuring that no remnants of the offending entity could threaten the Imperium in the future. The sight of a world reduced to ash became a chilling reminder of the Emperor's ultimate authority. Throughout these stages, public displays of punishment were a recurring theme. Whether through mass executions, public trials, or forced parades of the guilty, the Imperium leveraged these events as propaganda tools. These spectacles instilled fear and reinforced loyalty among the wider population, ensuring that the consequences of disobedience were etched into collective memory. The deliberate choice to make these punishments visible and memorable underscored the Imperium's intent to deter future dissent. As events unfolded, the focus often shifted from the perpetrators to the surrounding communities. Innocent bystanders were frequently caught in the crossfire, their suffering viewed as collateral damage or a necessary sacrifice for the greater good. Entire populations were displaced, conscripted, or subjected to collective punishment to root out potential sympathizers or collaborators. This indiscriminate approach served a dual purpose. It eliminated any lingering threats while also demonstrating that the Imperium's wrath was not constrained by notions of fairness or justice. Each stage of these events built upon the previous one, escalating in intensity and leaving an indelible mark on the affected regions. The Emperor's punishments were not mere acts of vengeance, but carefully orchestrated responses designed to reinforce the Imperium's unyielding authority. By the time these events reached their conclusion, they had reshaped the lives of countless individuals, leaving behind scars that would linger for generations. The galaxy, vast as it was, bore witness to these acts, and their legacy became a grim cornerstone of the Emperor's reign. The pivotal moment that defined the Emperor's most cruel punishments came from a singular, calculated decision: the determination that the survival of humanity justified any action, no matter how brutal or inhumane. This choice was not made lightly, but it fundamentally altered the course of imperial governance, establishing a precedent where compassion and leniency were subordinated to cold pragmatism. It was a shift that echoed across the galaxy, reshaping how justice was dispensed and setting the stage for acts of unimaginable severity. The key turning point arose during a moment of crisis when the emperor was confronted with a rebellion that threatened not just the stability of a single system, but the very unity of his fledgling Imperium. The rebellion, fueled by ideological dissent and emboldened by the support of multiple planetary governors, grew rapidly, spreading across neighboring sectors. Standard methods of suppression, such as military campaigns and diplomatic efforts, had failed to contain it. Worse, the defiance was inspiring other regions to question imperial authority, creating the risk of a cascading collapse. Faced with this unprecedented challenge, the emperor made a choice that would forever define his rule: to punish not only the rebels, but their worlds, their allies, and their cultures in a manner so absolute that it would extinguish any possibility of future dissent. This decision was rooted in the belief that a singular, overwhelming act of retribution could serve as a permanent deterrent, ensuring that no rebellion of similar scale would ever arise again. It was not enough to win. The rebellion needed to be erased from history, its memory replaced with a chilling example of what defiance would cost. The implementation of this decision marked a dramatic escalation in the methods used to enforce imperial rule. The emperor authorized actions that were previously unthinkable, including the exterminatus of entire planets. These acts were not limited to strategic targets. Civilian populations, cultural artifacts, and ecological systems were destroyed indiscriminately. The message was clear. The price of rebellion was annihilation. The worlds targeted by this policy became desolate husks, the ruins serving as stark reminders of the consequences of defiance. At the heart of this key moment was the emperor's recognition that fear was a more reliable tool of governance than faith or loyalty. While many of humanity's scattered populations had embraced the vision of a unified Imperium, others remained resistant, their allegiance fragile and conditional. By demonstrating the full extent of his power through acts of extreme punishment, the emperor ensured that loyalty was no longer optional. It was enforced through terror. This shift in philosophy transformed the Imperium from a dream of unity into a regime of control where survival depended on submission. The decision also redefined the role of the Imperium's institutions. The Inquisition, previously focused on rooting out heresy and corruption, was granted unprecedented authority to preemptively identify and eliminate threats. The military was no longer merely a tool of conquest, but a mechanism for enacting retribution. Even the ecclesiarchy adapted to this new reality, reshaping its sermons to glorify the emperor's justice as divine and unchallengeable. This alignment of institutions ensured that the policy of fear became ingrained at every level of imperial governance. Perhaps the most chilling aspect of this decision was its deliberate nature. The emperor did not act out of anger or desperation, but from a calculated assessment of the galaxy's realities. He understood that the challenges facing humanity, Xenos invasions, warp-born corruption, and internal dissent, could not be overcome with half measures. Sacrifices had to be made, and the lives of billions were deemed a necessary cost for the survival of the species. It was a choice that placed the needs of the many above the rights of the few, cementing the emperor's role as both savior and tyrant. This turning point also had a profound impact on the collective psyche of humanity. The knowledge that no one was safe from the emperor's judgment created a culture of paranoia and compliance. Rebellious thoughts were suppressed before they could take root, and acts of defiance became rare exceptions rather than common occurrences. Entire generations grew up under the shadow of this policy, their lives shaped by the fear of punishment and the unshakable belief that the emperor's will was absolute. In the end, this pivotal decision defined not just the emperor's reign, but the very identity of the Imperium. It was a moment that marked the transition from ambition to domination, from idealism to ruthless pragmatism. The consequences of this choice would reverberate across the galaxy, shaping the lives of countless individuals and ensuring that the Emperor's most cruel punishments would remain a central pillar of Imperial rule for millennia to come. This moment, more than any other, exemplified the harsh reality of the 40k universe, a future where survival is bought with sacrifice and peace is enforced through fear. The immediate impact of the Emperor's most severe punishments was felt across the galaxy, leaving scars on its very fabric and altering the trajectory of countless lives. These events resonated far beyond the systems directly affected, creating waves of fear, submission, and structural changes that reshaped the Imperium and its people in profound ways. Each punishment carried repercussions that extended not only to those who faced judgment, but to the witnesses and enforcers alike, embedding the consequences deep into the psyche of the Imperium. At the most localized level, the punishments decimated entire planetary populations. Those worlds that bore the brunt of Imperial wrath were rendered uninhabitable or left crippled, with their infrastructures obliterated and their populations either executed or displaced. Economically, this often meant the loss of vital industrial hubs, agricultural zones, or strategic outposts, which in turn created logistical strain on the wider sector. Neighboring systems were frequently forced to absorb the burden of these losses, redirecting resources and labor to fill the void, creating a ripple effect that strained the already stretched supply lines of the Imperium. For the survivors of these punishments, whether they were displaced refugees, forced laborers, or conscripts, the experience left lasting marks. Entire generations grew up bearing the trauma of witnessing the eradication of their homes, their cultures erased, and their futures dictated by the Imperium's demands. These individuals often became symbols of the Emperor's justice, their suffering serving as a constant reminder to others of the price of disobedience. The widespread displacement of these populations also created tensions within the systems that took them in, as the influx of refugees led to overcrowding, resource shortages, and a rise in conflict between displaced groups and native populations. On a broader scale, the punishment sent a clear and undeniable message to the rest of the galaxy. Systems that had considered defiance quickly abandoned such notions, understanding that the cost of rebellion was not merely defeat, but utter annihilation. For many, the fear of sharing the fate of punished worlds was enough to ensure compliance with Imperial rule, even if it bred resentment beneath the surface. Governors, officials, and military leaders became hyper-aware of their actions, often erring on the side of caution to avoid any behavior that could be construed as disloyal or negligent. The psychological impact of these punishments was perhaps their most far-reaching effect. Entire sectors fell under a shadow of paranoia, where even the slightest deviation from the Emperor's vision was met with suspicion. People turned on one another in an effort to prove their loyalty, resulting in widespread denunciations and purges. Families were torn apart, communities fractured, and trust eroded, all in the name of ensuring conformity to the Emperor's will. This culture of fear became a defining characteristic of the Imperium, shaping how its citizens lived, worked, and interacted with one another. The punishments also served to solidify the power structures of the Imperium. Organizations like the Inquisition and the Adeptus Arbits gained even greater authority, as their roles in identifying and executing punishment became essential to maintaining order. These institutions expanded their reach, often operating with near-total autonomy, and their influence permeated every aspect of Imperial life. The military, too, adapted to the demands of enforcing these punishments, developing new tactics, weaponry, and doctrines designed to instill maximum fear and destruction. However, the effects of these punishments were not confined to humanity alone. Alien species, particularly those residing on the fringes of Imperial space, observed the consequences of defiance with a mixture of fear and defiance. While some Xenos civilizations withdrew or capitulated to Imperial demands, others saw the punishments as evidence of humanity's ruthlessness and became even more determined to resist. This dual reaction created new challenges for the Imperium, as it faced increased hostility in some regions while securing uneasy alliances in others. Even the warp itself felt the echoes of these punishments. The immense suffering and destruction generated by such acts created ripples within the Imperium, attracting the attention of malevolent entities. The emotions of despair, terror, and rage fed the dark forces lurking within the warp, amplifying their influence and creating new threats for the Imperium to contend with. This unintended consequence added another layer of complexity to the already volatile relationship between the material and immaterial realms. Finally, the immediate impact of these punishments reinforced the image of the Emperor as an unchallengeable figure of authority. For many, he became the embodiment of divine justice, his actions justified by the need to preserve humanity at all costs. This perception elevated his status from a ruler to a godlike figure, worshipped and feared in equal measure. Yet for others, the brutality of these punishments sowed seeds of doubt and resentment, creating undercurrents of discontent that would fester in the shadows of the Imperium. These far-reaching consequences illustrate how the Emperor's most cruel punishments reshaped not just the immediate victims, but the entire galaxy. The actions taken to enforce loyalty and suppress defiance created a legacy of fear, division, and adaptation that defined the Imperium in the years that followed, ensuring that the lessons of those punishments would never be forgotten. The Emperor's most brutal punishments are deeply intertwined with the technological and symbolic tools used to execute them, many of which hold a dark fascination for fans of the Warhammer 40k universe. These punishments are often as much about spectacle as they are about enforcing order, employing methods and devices that serve to etch the consequences of defiance into the collective memory of the Imperium. The unique aspects of these punishments reflect the Emperor's calculated use of both technology and ideology to achieve his goals, creating chilling stories and artifacts that continue to provoke debate and speculation among enthusiasts. One of the most infamous methods associated with imperial punishment is the practice of servitor conversion. This process, in which a criminal or heretic is stripped of their humanity and transformed into a mindless, mechanized drone, is seen as a fate worse than death. Servitors are programmed to carry out menial or dangerous tasks without will or emotion, their very existence a testament to the cost of disobedience. The conversion process is deliberately publicized in certain cases, reinforcing the idea that even the most defiant individuals can be reduced to tools of the Imperium. The eerie sight of servitors mindlessly fulfilling their duties in hive cities and military installations serves as a constant reminder of the power the Emperor wields over life and identity. Another unique aspect lies in the construction and deployment of penitence engines. These towering constructs are not simply weapons of war, but instruments of punishment for those who have been deemed irredeemable yet still useful. Piloted by individuals who have committed grievous sins, penitence engines merge the condemned with machinery, forcing them to atone for their crimes through endless battle. The pilot is kept in a state of perpetual agony, their suffering both a form of penance and a tool for driving their destructive purpose. The design of these engines reflects the Imperium's grim philosophy. Punishment can be a form of utility, and even the damned can serve the Emperor's will. The use of planetary destruction as a punitive measure also stands out as a uniquely devastating aspect of imperial justice. While exterminatus is often discussed in terms of its tactical application, its role as a punishment is equally significant. The decision to enact exterminatus is not made lightly, but when it is carried out, it serves as the ultimate symbol of the Emperor's authority. The mechanisms of exterminatus vary, from virus bombs that annihilate all organic life to cyclonic torpedoes that destabilize a planet's crust. Each method is horrifying in its own right, and the sheer scale of destruction ensures that the punishment resonates far beyond the targeted world, serving as a stark warning to others. The psychological manipulation tied to these punishments is another element that fans frequently discuss. The Imperium is not content to merely punish transgressors. It seeks to use their suffering as a tool for indoctrination. Public trials, forced confessions, and the display of mutilated bodies are all carefully orchestrated to instill fear and reinforce loyalty. Even the language surrounding these events is deliberately chosen to emphasize the Emperor's divine justice, framing every act of punishment as a righteous necessity. This combination of physical and psychological tactics ensures that the consequences of disobedience are deeply ingrained in the minds of all who witness or hear of them. One particularly morbid yet fascinating topic involves the so-called living examples created by the Imperium. These individuals are subjected to unique forms of punishment that ensure their suffering is prolonged and visible. Some are kept alive through advanced technology, their bodies transformed into grotesque reminders of their crimes. Others are paraded across star systems, their mutilated forms used to demonstrate the reach and power of the Emperor's justice. These living examples are not simply punished, they are weaponized, their existence serving as a tool for maintaining order and obedience. The role of relics and symbols in these punishments also cannot be overlooked. Artifacts created from the remains of punished individuals, such as banners sewn from the skin of heretics or trophies forged from the bones of traitors, are used to inspire fear and devotion among the Imperium's citizens. These macabre items are often displayed in cathedrals or carried into battle, serving as both a warning to enemies and a rallying point for loyalists. The integration of these relics into imperial culture reflects the extent to which punishment has become a fundamental aspect of the Imperium's identity. Perhaps one of the most intriguing aspects of these punishments is the moral ambiguity they present. While the Imperium frames them as necessary for the survival of humanity, their cruelty often sparks debates among fans about the ethical implications of such actions. Are these punishments truly justified, or do they represent the corruption of the Emperor's vision? This tension between necessity and morality is a recurring theme, adding depth to the stories and sparking endless discussions within the community. These unique aspects of the Emperor's punishments highlight the intricate and often disturbing ways in which the Imperium enforces its authority. From the use of advanced technology to the manipulation of fear and symbolism, each element serves a specific purpose in maintaining order and control. At the same time, these methods reveal the darker side of the Emperor's reign, offering a glimpse into the cost of survival in the grim darkness of the far future. Among the myriad figures associated with the Emperor's most cruel punishments, several individuals stand out for their pivotal roles, their unique qualities, and the indelible marks they left on the history of the Imperium. These figures, whether as enforcers of the Emperor's will or as infamous examples of those subjected to his wrath, embody the extremes of loyalty, ambition, and defiance that define the Imperium. Their stories reveal the human and inhuman elements behind these brutal acts, showcasing the strengths and flaws that shaped their destinies. One of the most renowned enforcers of imperial punishment is an inquisitor whose unwavering commitment to rooting out heresy became legendary. This individual epitomized the ruthless efficiency required to maintain the Emperor's vision, often operating in the shadows to uncover the seeds of rebellion before they could take root. Their intellect and methodical approach allowed them to dismantle entire networks of traitors, yet their greatest strength, their unyielding dedication to the Emperor, was also their greatest flaw. This single-minded focus often led them to overlook the broader consequences of their actions, creating resentment and collateral damage that sometimes fueled further dissent. In stark contrast to this figure is a planetary governor whose story became a cautionary tale throughout the Imperium. Initially a staunch loyalist, their descent into defiance stemmed from a combination of arrogance and desperation. As they struggled to maintain control over a rebellious populace, they began to question the demands of the Imperium, ultimately attempting to sever ties and declare independence. The emperor's response was swift and merciless, and the governor's public execution became one of the most infamous examples of the price of betrayal. Their story is often cited not only as a warning, but also as a study in the fragile balance between power and accountability within the Imperium. Another key figure is a tech priest of the Mechanicum who played a critical role in developing some of the most horrifying instruments of punishment. Their obsession with perfection and efficiency drove them to create devices that could extract confessions, inflict suffering, and eliminate threats with chilling precision. Despite their brilliance, this individual's disregard for morality and their inability to understand the emotional impact of their creations made them a deeply controversial figure. Many within the Mechanicum revered their work, but others saw them as a grim reminder of the dangers of unrestrained technological ambition. The military sphere also provides examples of individuals whose actions defined the Emperor's punishments. One particularly notable commander earned infamy for leading a campaign that resulted in the complete annihilation of a rebellious sector. Known for their strategic genius and unshakable loyalty, this leader executed the Emperor's orders with an almost mechanical detachment, treating the destruction of entire populations as a necessary duty. However, their lack of empathy and the sheer scale of their actions left a legacy of fear and mistrust, even among their allies. While their name is celebrated in imperial propaganda, it is whispered with dread in the regions that survived their wrath. On the opposite end of the spectrum is a heretic whose defiance and ultimate punishment became a rallying cry for those who question the Imperium's methods. This individual's charisma and conviction allowed them to unite disparate factions in a rebellion that threatened imperial control over a vital sector. Their eventual capture and public execution were intended to quash dissent, but their martyrdom had the unintended effect of inspiring underground movements that persisted long after their death. Their story remains a polarizing one, with some viewing them as a dangerous traitor and others as a symbol of resistance against tyranny. One cannot discuss the Emperor's punishments without mentioning a high-ranking ecclesiarch whose fiery sermons and unshakable belief in the Emperor's divine justice played a crucial role in justifying and glorifying these acts. This individual's ability to inspire both fear and devotion among the masses ensured that the punishments were seen not merely as retribution, but as sacred acts necessary for humanity's survival. However, their zealousness occasionally bordered on fanaticism, leading to conflicts with other imperial institutions and raising questions about the limits of their influence. Finally, there are those whose roles in these punishments remain shrouded in mystery, their identities and actions known only through whispered rumors and fragmented records. These shadowy figures are believed to have been instrumental in orchestrating some of the most devastating acts of retribution, operating behind the scenes to ensure that the Emperor's will was carried out without hesitation or compromise. Their anonymity serves as both a shield and a weapon, allowing them to act with impunity while spreading an air of fear and uncertainty. These individuals, with their diverse motivations, strengths, and flaws, highlight the deeply human aspects of the Emperor's punishments. Whether as enforcers, victims, or symbols, their stories add layers of complexity to the narrative, demonstrating that even in the grim darkness of the far future, the actions of a few can shape the fate of many. Through their triumphs and failures, they reveal the harsh realities of an Imperium that demands absolute loyalty and punishes defiance without mercy. The topic of the Emperor's most brutal punishments is fraught with unresolved questions and lingering mysteries that continue to fuel debates within the Warhammer 40k community. These uncertainties extend beyond the acts themselves, touching upon the motivations, implications, and long-term consequences of such measures. These open-ended discussions add layers of intrigue to the narrative, as fans and scholars alike grapple with what is known and speculate about what remains hidden. One of the most contentious questions revolves around the Emperor's true intentions behind some of the more extreme punishments. Was the severity of these acts a calculated strategy to ensure humanity's survival, or did they reflect a deeper, more personal need to assert control over a fractious galaxy? While much of the Emperor's actions are framed as necessary for the greater good, there is little consensus on whether such brutality was always justified. This question becomes even murkier when considering the fact that some punishments seemed excessive even by the Imperium's grim standards. Did the Emperor believe fear was the only viable tool for uniting humanity, or was there an unspoken element of anger or frustration driving these acts? Another widely discussed topic concerns the role of free will and individual agency within the Imperium's rigid structure of punishment. The Emperor's justice often relied on collective punishment, where entire populations or organizations were penalized for the actions of a few. This raises the question of whether the Imperium's approach undermines its own goals by stifling innovation and loyalty through fear. Could a more balanced system of justice, one that recognized individual accountability over collective guilt, have achieved the same results without such widespread suffering? Or was the scale of the threats facing humanity so great that such measures were unavoidable? The question of proportionality is another source of debate. Some examples of the Emperor's punishments, such as the exterminatus of entire planets, seem to go beyond what was necessary to achieve strategic or symbolic objectives. This raises the question of whether these acts were designed purely as deterrents or if they reflected a deeper flaw in the Imperium's governance. Did the Emperor overestimate the need for such measures, or were they genuinely the only means of preventing further rebellion? The answer remains unclear, as historical records often lack the context needed to fully understand the decisions made during these events. One of the more intriguing theories concerns the psychological impact of these punishments on the Emperor himself. While he is often portrayed as a figure of unwavering resolve, some speculate that the burden of enacting such measures may have taken a toll on his psyche. Did the Emperor wrestle with guilt or regret over the lives lost and the suffering inflicted? Or was he truly indifferent to the human cost of his actions? This question is particularly compelling when considering his broader vision for humanity. If the Emperor sought to guide mankind toward enlightenment and unity, how did he reconcile that vision with the cruelty of his methods? There are also unresolved questions about the role of external influences in shaping the Emperor's approach to punishment. The warp and its chaotic forces have always loomed large over the Imperium, and some wonder whether the Emperor's decision to wield fear and brutality as tools of governance was partially influenced by his need to counter these threats. Did the constant presence of chaos necessitate a more draconian approach to discipline, or did the Emperor's exposure to the warp amplify the darker aspects of his rule? This theory suggests that his actions may have been as much a response to external pressures as they were a reflection of his own philosophy. The legacy of these punishments also raises questions about their long-term effectiveness. While they undoubtedly instilled fear and compliance in the short term, their impact on the Imperium's stability over millennia remains a matter of debate. Did the culture of fear and repression ultimately strengthen the Imperium, or did it sow the seeds of further rebellion and dissent? There is evidence to support both perspectives, with some pointing to the enduring loyalty of many sectors and others highlighting the numerous insurrections and heresies that have erupted throughout imperial history. This duality underscores the complexity of the Emperor's decisions and their far-reaching consequences. The fate of those who were subjected to these punishments but not entirely destroyed is another area of speculation. Stories of survivors, whether they are individuals who endured servitor conversion, planets that narrowly escaped exterminatus, or groups that fled into the warp to escape imperial justice, add an air of mystery to the narrative. What became of these remnants, and how do they perceive the Emperor's rule? Some may harbor resentment and plot revenge, while others may view their survival as a form of divine intervention, creating yet another layer of complexity in the galaxy's already chaotic landscape. Finally, there is the question of how these punishments are remembered and interpreted within the Imperium itself. Over the centuries, many of these events have been mythologized, their details obscured by propaganda and religious fervor. This raises the possibility that the true nature of the emperor's actions has been lost or deliberately altered to suit the needs of the ecclesiarchy or other imperial institutions. How much of what is known about these punishments is historical fact, and how much is the product of a carefully curated narrative designed to reinforce the Imperium's authority? These unresolved questions and theories ensure that the topic of the Emperor's most cruel punishments remains a fertile ground for discussion and debate. They highlight the complexities and contradictions of the Imperium, offering a glimpse into the moral and philosophical dilemmas that underpin its existence. In a galaxy defined by its extremes, these mysteries serve as a reminder that even the most powerful figures and institutions are not immune to doubt and uncertainty. The long-term consequences of the Emperor's most severe punishments have deeply shaped the Imperium and continue to influence its trajectory, both positively and negatively. These punishments, rooted in fear and uncompromising discipline, have left a legacy that permeates every level of the Imperium's vast bureaucracy, its military apparatus, and its cultural identity. While they have undoubtedly secured short-term stability and obedience, their enduring effects raise questions about the sustainability and morality of such a brutal system of governance. One of the most significant outcomes of these punishments is the entrenched culture of fear that defines the Imperium. This fear has become a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it has ensured compliance across countless worlds, maintaining a fragile unity in the face of unrelenting threats. The knowledge that defiance can result in annihilation has deterred countless rebellions and encouraged loyalty among planetary governors and citizens alike. On the other hand, this fear has stifled creativity, innovation, and independent thought, leaving the Imperium reliant on rigid traditions and dogma. In the long term, this stagnation could prove disastrous, as humanity's ability to adapt and evolve is severely limited by its own fear-driven policies. The psychological toll of these punishments has also had profound effects on the Imperium's citizens. Generations have grown up under the shadow of these brutal acts, their lives shaped by the constant reminder of what happens to those who stray from the Emperor's path. This has created a populace that is often submissive, paranoid, and deeply distrustful of one another. While this mindset has been effective in preventing large-scale rebellions, it has also eroded the sense of community and solidarity that could strengthen the Imperium from within. Over time, this widespread mistrust could lead to fragmentation, as individuals and factions prioritize self-preservation over collective well-being. Another long-term consequence lies in the militarization of imperial society. The punishments carried out in the name of the Emperor have necessitated a constant state of readiness, with vast resources devoted to the enforcement of his will. This has created a society where military power is valued above all else, with entire worlds dedicated to producing soldiers, weapons, and war machines. While this has allowed the Imperium to respond to external threats with overwhelming force, it has also diverted resources away from other vital areas, such as infrastructure, education, and technological advancement. The relentless focus on warfare may leave the Imperium ill-prepared to address challenges that cannot be solved through brute force. The punishments have also had a lasting impact on humanity's relationship with the warp. The extreme suffering and destruction associated with these acts have left deep scars in the Immaterium, feeding the malevolent entities that dwell there. This has, in turn, increased the prevalence of warp-based phenomena, creating new dangers for the Imperium to contend with. While the punishments were often carried out in the name of eradicating heresy and corruption, their unintended consequences may have inadvertently strengthened the very forces they sought to destroy. In the long term, this cyclical relationship between punishment and warp influence could further destabilize the galaxy. From a cultural perspective, the glorification of these punishments has deeply influenced the Imperium's collective identity. The narratives surrounding these acts have been mythologized, creating a reverence for the Emperor's justice that borders on fanaticism. While this has helped to solidify loyalty and faith in the Emperor, it has also perpetuated a cycle of violence and repression. As these stories are passed down through generations, they reinforce the idea that suffering and sacrifice are not only necessary, but desirable. This mindset has become so deeply ingrained that it limits the Imperium's ability to envision alternative paths, trapping it in a perpetual state of conflict and fear. Looking to the future, there are several possible outcomes for the Imperium as a result of this legacy. On the positive side, the unyielding discipline and fear instilled by these punishments may allow the Imperium to withstand even the most catastrophic threats. In a galaxy as hostile and unforgiving as the one humanity inhabits, the willingness to take extreme measures could be the very thing that ensures its survival. However, this resilience comes at a cost, and the long-term sustainability of such a system is far from guaranteed. If the Imperium continues to rely on fear and repression as its primary tools of governance, it risks alienating its own citizens and fostering resentment that could eventually boil over into rebellion. While the punishments have been effective in deterring open defiance, they have not eliminated the underlying causes of dissent. Over time, the cracks in the Imperium's foundation could widen, leading to internal conflicts that may prove even more devastating than external threats. Alternatively, the Imperium may face a situation where its rigid adherence to these methods leaves it unable to adapt to new challenges, resulting in stagnation and eventual collapse. There is also the potential for change, though such a shift would require a dramatic reimagining of the Imperium's values and practices. If the Imperium were to move away from its reliance on fear and embrace a more balanced approach to governance, it could foster greater unity and resilience among its citizens. However, given the deeply entrenched nature of these punishments and the cultural reverence surrounding them, such a transformation would be exceedingly difficult to achieve. Ultimately, the long-term significance of the Emperor's most cruel punishments lies in their duality. They have ensured humanity's survival in a galaxy filled with unthinkable dangers, but they have also created a system that perpetuates suffering, fear, and stagnation. Whether the Imperium can break free from this cycle, or whether it will continue to be defined by these brutal acts, remains an open question, one that will shape the fate of humanity for millennia to come.